Hi, my name is Armando Vilaseca, and welcome to Education. Join the conversation. I'm very fortunate today to have with us on the show 4 teachers who have been recognized for their excellence in teaching. We can all remember teachers who were important to us, who impacted our lives, who really made a connection with us, and we remember them forever. I believe the 4 teachers with me fill that category, and I would like to introduce them and then provide them with a little bit of time to talk about their current teaching experiences, where they teach, what they teach, and just talk a little bit about their schools. To my right is Jay Hoffman, who's the 2013 Vermont Teacher of the Year. To his right is Katie Sullivan, who is the 2007 Vermont Teacher of the Year. To her right is Matt Hajdun, who is the 2012 Milken Award winner, which is a national award that Vermont participates in. And to his right is Tong Chen, who is the 2012 Teacher of the Year. And I'd like for them to at least introduce themselves and say a little bit about their current teaching experience. Jay?
Hi, I'm Jay Hoffman, and I teach in the South Burlington School District. I teach technology education, and I've been there for quite some time, about 17 years in this particular wonderful district. We really have, I think, gained a lot of notoriety in our unusual leveraging of technology in the classroom and what we've done with it. We've kind of gotten outside of the classroom with the technology and integrated with the community. And so we've a collection, an array of very interesting technologies that have come our way as a result of need. So what we've collected because the students needed it to accomplish what they do. So it's very outcome-based. The skills are very realistic. I'll always talk about the 3 R's today, you know, just relationships and rigor and just relevant. And so a lot of what we do is relevant. The kids have their own news team. It's a student-led news team, and they broadcast the news once a week. They have their own sexual crime prevention show, kids teaching kids about sexual crime prevention. That's a nice integration piece. And we also pilot a 8th grade class called Social Media for Learning. Can you imagine? Do you think we could use social media for learning? And we explore that there in collaboration with a local Champlain college.
Great. Thank you, Jay. Katie?
I'm Katie Sullivan, and I teach 3rd and 4th grade, a multi-age combined class at Warren School in Warren, Vermont. And it's a pretty rural area, but it's a very involved community, so I'm very fortunate to be in a small, wonderful family-type community. We're participating in an interesting civic engagement activity right now where I'm challenging my students to, I'm calling it take a stand on the land, and they're participating in this writing challenge that is about an actual issue that's going on right now in the town of Vermont around land use. There's a parcel of land that abuts the school. It's right next to the school, and all the students use it. It's got a nature trail on it, and the town is trying to decide what to do with it. One option is to put it into a conservation easement that's run by the Vermont Land Trust. And so there's a lot of strong feelings about it. Either way, we're hoping that maybe it'll come up for a vote at town meeting. And I'm having my students do some research on it and take a stand, write what they think the town should do with this parcel of land. It's an authentic, relevant, real experience for them. We had a forum where we invited in town officials, select board members, planning commissioners, conservation commissioners, and they all gave background and said what they think should happen. So right now that's what my students are doing. We're blogging about it, and we're doing some writing, and pretty soon the kids are going to pick how they want to share the information that they've come up with and their stand, so they can convince others to agree with them. So
It's exciting.
It's very exciting right now.
Matt?
Great. My name is Matt Hajdun, and I teach 4th and 5th grade at Champlain Elementary School in Burlington, Vermont. And I am a looping teacher, so I have my current class I've had for a full year and now half a year.
Great.
So we have that gift of time with students at our school, which is a gift maybe to me and maybe not to them, but
I'm sure it is.
depends on your perception, I suppose, right? And I just feel really thankful to be able to teach in Burlington because it has all these different cultures represented, and today we just had a really fantastic assembly under the theme of We All Belong, and kids were singing in their native language, and our music teacher put on this fantastic assembly that just involved connecting to the community. A lot of the themes that you guys were just actually talking about, how we can connect to our community, and that is, I feel like, a constant goal of education in Burlington and many other schools as well. So I feel very fortunate to be a part of that community, teaching in Burlington.
Tong?
Hi, my name is Tong Chen. I teach Chinese to 7th through 12th grade students at Leland and Gray High School in Townsend, Vermont. This is my 8th year serving in the community, and it has been a wonderful experience for me, both as a person and as a teacher. It's a very small community, but it's a very supportive community. I'm very lucky to be a part of the community. The community members are very supportive of Chinese culture and any China studies programs. We have a wonderful program called Journey East, which sends students and teachers to China for a month every year. Now it's every other year. And we also host students and teachers from China to perform Mongolian art and dance and songs, especially throat singing, to Vermont community members and schools across Vermont. My students have given me a lot of inspirations to be a good teacher, and more importantly, to be a better teacher. So I'm very grateful that I'm able to be a part of the community, and I'm able to call myself a teacher for my students.
Thank you. Just for a second, Matt, you mentioned looping. So folks may not know what looping is. Could you just give a quick explanation on what that is?
Sure, yeah. Looping is just when you follow a class for usually 2 years. So with the example in my classroom, I had my 4th grade students last year. I taught them in their whole 4th grade year, and then I followed them into 5th grade as well. So yeah, we call it giving it the gift of time as best we can.
But I think that's a good explanation for the folks who may not know what that meant. I think looping is a wonderful way of students and teachers making a connection over 2 years and not having to sort of relearn each other's style. And it does provide, I think, the gift of time,
right.
As you said.
Yeah, we can really start on day one in that 2nd year. We've built all these routines. We have our community, and I know where my students are at the end of the school year, and I can just pick up and start where we left off, which is great.
One of the things that every one of you mentioned, things that I think for many of us may not be relevant in school when we were in school. Jay, you talked about students having their own TV shows and on particular things. Katie, you talked about kids blogging. You know, Matt, you talked about this morning with the presentation, and as well as when I was there, with students singing songs of their native language, tying into your school. And Tong in Leland Gray, which has had a long, long history with connections with China, teaching Chinese, which most Vermonters would think that's not the language that they taught in the school. And my point I'm getting to is schools have changed quite a bit over the past 10, 20, 30, and for many of us, longer. And maybe just briefly talk about what changes you've seen from when you maybe were in school to what you're doing now, how that ties into learning. I like several of you have talked about relevance and how do you make school more relevant using some of today's tools. Jay, I guess I'll start with you because you're right here.
We'll start right next to you. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a great start with the word relevance. 17 years ago, I came into a wood shop. I'm a certified, and many of us in my generation recognize the term wood shop teacher. We graduated to being industrial art teachers along the way in that transformational process. We still cut wood. So, but back then, I had to make a decision, a really important decision. How do I remain relevant? And skills and the demands for skills began to change. We're not in the Industrial Revolution anymore. We entered the age of information. And so I recognized that communications would play a central role in these kids' lives. In fact, I put all the eggs in that basket and said, I really think that communication is going to come front and center. And so I sold every tool in the lab. We had a garage sale. We sold everything. We did just big auction. And year by year, we built, on a grant, we built a TV studio, little tin drop lights, and we started out with little $200 cameras. And a year at a time, we became more and more digital until there wasn't any more dust in the classroom. It became a state-of-the-art digital lab that it is today. Now, it's always evolving, but I've been retooled and recycled, actually. So for me, things have changed like night and day.
In just your short career?
In just my short career.
Yes, yes, good. Katie, you've been teaching, again, probably for 20 years, I think you mentioned. I was in the I was in schools for 30 years, so we've seen, you know, we're almost paralleled together. Give us a little bit of your experiences and what you've seen change and how you're applying those changes today.
Well, I definitely agree. I mean, we're not as digital as Jay's school by any stretch, but we're definitely utilizing a lot of the technology that's available to us in fabulous ways. Our class did a podcast and GarageBand so that they can actually compose music on the computers. There's so much available to us now that we're actually really using. But I do also want to talk a little bit about something that's not about technology. Our focus also is a lot about teaching social skills and also making the classroom a place where kids feel safe to take risks. And so we do a lot through either responsive classroom, which a lot of the schools in Vermont use. We do a lot of teaching about the social issues and how to be a good team member, how to be a good advocate for themselves and to believe in themselves. And we spend some time with that. We also do, and this is something a lot of schools are doing more now, mindfulness, relaxation kind of training. So some of those aspects are coming into our teaching more than when I first started, because we didn't really have those that focus of, you know, when a child comes in and starts the day, they're not necessarily ready to learn that there's a lot that goes into getting prepared for being open and ready for taking risks and for feeling safe. So that's another change that I think is important in addition to some of the technology.
Definitely.
Matt?
Yeah, I would say I think the biggest change from what I remember being a student to now being a teacher is, I don't know how the teacher felt, but the demands on the teacher have certainly, I feel, increased. I can remember getting my one spelling book and my one reading book and my one math book, and there has not been a single day in my very short career where I've taught one lesson to everyone in all of the subject areas. You know, I have 5 reading groups. I'll give one lesson in math, and then I'm meeting with small groups. I have 5 spelling groups. Writing is, it's a messy process. And those demands are, they could be social emotional demands that are, you know, causing us to need to differentiate. They could be academic skills. Just the constant demand of differentiating. It takes a really long time, and I just definitely know when I walked in that, you know, everyone had the same exact thing, and that's not how it works anymore. And that is a huge change in the demands on the teacher, and also in the gains of the student. The fact that I can deliver instruction, you know, directly to a small group right where they're at is really powerful, and will have hopefully a big impact on kids. But there also is that change in the reality. It's not just fair to say, you know, teachers pull in and pull out at X time. because it's a different reality than it has been before. And you touched on the social emotional piece, which is a huge thing. Again, it could be my memory, but I don't ever recall my teacher telling me how to give a stop message, practicing with me about how to give iMessages, to take responsibility for things. That might have been something that was instilled at home, or it's a cultural shift, but that is definitely in the classroom. It's an everyday reality. So I'm an academic teacher and a social emotional teacher. And I have a lot of academic responsibilities and social emotional responsibilities. So it's a different reality in the schools now, I think.
And
we're looking at the whole
talk a little bit
history.
more about that later. I think that both of you have addressed something that I think is good for our folks at home to understand about the changes in education. Tong, and you're in a course that was unknown in Vermont 5 years ago, let's say, maybe 6, 7 years ago. So tell us, how that's been taken in your school, and how you've been able to integrate Chinese foreign language into the school and the community, because it's more than just a school, because Townsend has had a relationship with China for many, many years.
Correct. I feel I'm a very lucky teacher, because I walked into a community which is very supportive of my native language and culture. So that's a tremendous support. And what I see as changes in education, say in the subject area I teach, is that there are changes in both teaching and learning. And we teachers go into classrooms not to deliver information, but to help the students to gain knowledge. Even though my subject area is Chinese language, but I don't teach subjects, I teach students. So I have to keep my eyes open, pay attention to my students, and make sure I notice what they need, and make sure I differentiated my instruction to meet their needs. And I also noticed the change in our classrooms, that it's really, really, really learner-focused, student-centered. That's our ultimate goal, to make sure our students learn, and more importantly, to connect learning to living. For my subject area, the connection between learning and living is that students are able to use the language to communicate. Saying hello to a Chinese person in the community, maybe order food from a local Chinese restaurant, and be more involved in the programs we have when we have our Chinese delegation visiting us each year. So these are changes I see, and these changes are very positive. So I'm very pleasant to see what's going on now in my school and in the community I serve.
One of the things that not only are these 4 teachers wonderful teachers, but I think you heard them all talk about connections with kids. That those interpersonal relationships, which really are, to me, the single most important thing when I'm, as a parent, I want my child to have a relationship with a teacher that's trusting, that's respectful, that allows for interaction. And so we heard that from all of them, which then leads me to, several of you have talked about connections and differentiating instruction, the social emotional component. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges that our children are facing today, and this week more so than other weeks after that terrible, unthinkable tragedy in Connecticut. What are some of those areas? And you all have, from middle school to elementary, high school, you all have different. So I'm going to start with Katie, because you're in the middle, and then I'm going to work to Jay, then I'm going to work my way around here, just to throw you off.
Well, I don't even necessarily want to separate children out from adults. Everybody has a lot of social and emotional needs, but one of the most important things is that when kids come into school, that they have good nutrition, and that they've had at least a good breakfast, and that they have a good lunch. So that's one of the things that the school can do a great job of serving, that role of making sure that the kids, if the school has a breakfast program and a lunch program, and just instituted a backpack program where some food can even go home for the kids in their backpacks. So, you know, not being hungry is a big, important piece of being able to learn and contribute to a community. So Warren's doing a lot of that, and all the schools that I've been involved with are. And then the other piece is definitely that, again, their school and their classroom and their relationship with their teacher is one where they feel safe. And if something has them anxious or if things are difficult, that relationship with their teacher is another safe and comforting and meaningful one, that it's another place where they can go and they can get a lot of support. And so you're not just, as Matt said very clearly, you're not just teaching them the academics, but you're developing a relationship which then is a back and forth between two human beings.
Thank you. And and if we have more time later on, and we'll talk a little about responsive classroom. You mentioned that before. I think those, again, some words that people may not know, but are really a strong part of many of our, particularly elementary schools. So I want to see if we can come back to that. Jay?
Well, to affirm what Katie was saying too, and in light of our recent tragedy, we talked in our social media class, how do we deal with our stress? So we chose to peel a different layer away and say, let's talk about stress. We all walk the line. We all have stressful lives. And the difference for us being just about insane and normal is so thin and so narrow. So what are we doing to take care of ourselves? And as we teach kids to leverage technology, we would be remiss if we didn't teach them how to take a time out. And so I really appreciate when you talked about inner resiliency and mindfulness. And so we find ourselves now, here's this once woodshop teacher, but now I'm talking about interpersonal skills. We're actually having mindfulness activities, and we're talking quite frankly with the students and very openly, how do you take care of yourself? What do you do to just let go of everything? And I was really, really encouraged by what some of the students were telling me. 8th grade students. Right. I like to paddleboard. It's just me in the water. Another one said, I like to kayak. Another boy said, I like to take my dog for a walk. I literally think about nothing. Another girl said, I like to hike. And then I just hike, and they actually gave me ideas on how I can be more mindful. And we remind them in building that relationship that I don't have the answer. I'm not your perfect role model. I sometimes have 2 devices sitting in front of me on the coffee table at the same time. I'm learning with you. But we really learn together about these skills that once we never even looked at.
Good.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would say, I mean, the first thing that we have to do as teachers, as part of that social emotional awareness, is make sure kids are ready to learn. And that involves, it's a responsive classroom thing of having a morning meeting, every day. Right off the bat, I want my kids there and present, and I want them to feel like this is their space and that's their community. And lots of students are coming to school without having some sort of connection before they leave the house. And so, our first job is to make kids available to learn. And once you are able to do that, then the great exciting things can happen. I think every adult has an experience of not being available, whether it's a food issue or a social emotional issue. Sometimes you're just checked out, and to come up with those strategies and techniques that get kids back and engaged, and we do breathing techniques and model taking a break, and a lot of that is the reason that we have to do that. It is, I think, in my opinion, but there is that society piece, and I can walk in a store and hear people yelling at each other or not taking a break. The tragedy in Connecticut resulted from someone not being able to deal with some of the strong emotions that they were feeling. And everyone feels strong emotions, and how do we help kids figure out how to deal with those emotions? And then we also have that added challenge of, okay, you're in that space, now let's do something with that learning. So I think there is this sort of society piece. Not everybody has all of these skills, and kids need to know those skills so that they can have the access to the learning piece.
Thank you. Tong?
What we just discussed reminded me of some stories. This past summer, one of the parents approached me and asked me, say, Ms. Chen, my son is not a hardworking person. I'm wondering how you gave him 87 as his final grades. I told this parent, I said, I didn't give it to your son. He earned it. Not everybody is strong in core courses, English, math, science. Some students, they stand out in sports or music or foreign languages, or they do really well in standardized tests. But this student, I think I had a very positive relationship with him. He was comfortable sharing what he does with me, and I had an access to reach out to him, and that's important. That's what you talked about, teacher-student relationship. He wants to work. He wants to do a good job. For me, that's what he told me one day. It's the best thing ever. Then another parent asked me one time, she is a principal. She said, thank you to me. She said, thank you for making my children shine. I currently have 2 of her children in my classes. I think sometimes parents really take it wrong. It's not us. It's their own children. They worked hard to be at where they are at. These are true stories. I think these stories are very powerful. I don't know what is the best practice. I didn't know what to give answers to when I was asked that question. I don't know what is it. What is the best practice? I think what's the best is what works for our children. My best practice might not work in your classroom or your classroom or Matt's classroom. And what works in each of your classrooms might not work in my classroom because our students are very different. So in order for us to help our students to solve their problems, to reach out to each of them, I think what you just discussed, establishing relationship, is the key. We're all humans, and we just have to understand each other.
And I think that's what makes not just you and the thousands and thousands of other teachers in Vermont or around across this country, that really it's having a relationship, teaching the classes, making sure the students are successful, but always looping back and making sure they're okay. It's interesting, Katie, our last show was about nutrition, because we understand that students starting school need to be ready. In this conversation, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I'm a 18-year-old, 19-year-old, or someone thinking about going into teaching or currently studying to be a teacher, I probably always think about the academics part. You've talked about much more than academics. Can you just talk a little bit about what advice you would give in the short time we have left for someone who's going into education? And then at some point before we leave, I want to hear responsive classroom a little bit more for the folks, and I want you to talk about the flipped classroom as well, because I think that's going to be something that may be new to folks. But advice, Tong, for a new teacher?
To pay attention. Because you're not only teaching, you have to pay attention. I had a student from your area, he's a sophomore, from South Burlington High School. He wanted to be a Chinese teacher. He came down to Townsend, Vermont, to my school, and he shadowed me that day. I didn't know that I could really influence a young man in that way. I met him in one of the programs I work in the summer. Pay attention. Teachers have to pay attention. You work with children. They are very creative. They have a lot of ideas. You have to pay attention. That's my advice. Pay attention.
Good advice. Okay, Matt, we're going to work our way backwards.
Okay, sounds good. I think just take the time to know your students. That's the most important thing. To take that time and to have that relationship is just a critical piece. And then a second piece of advice would be, I think this was a mistake that I made at first. I get really stuck in my classroom, which has some benefits, but I also miss out on some of the other things that my colleagues are doing. And it's sad that you can only give an award out when there is so much excellence. And anytime that I've been able to make collaboration work, right now I have 2 amazing colleagues as partners teaching 4th and 5th grade with me. And every time we meet, it's a learning experience, and I feel like I'm improving every day from their example, from their questions, from their sharing, and that makes a huge difference. So we've got pay attention and and collaborate and know your students so far.
And learn from others, learn from your colleagues.
Right.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Katie.
Well, I think you need to know where your passion is coming from, because as you can see, if you look at these teachers, the passionate teacher is the effective teacher. But a lot of times people go into teaching and they think they have a passion for it, and it's much more difficult than they expected it to be. So if you are passionate about being a teacher, try to figure out a way to get back to that passion. If it's a journal or, I keep a little envelope where I put letters from students and parents and colleagues, administrators. I put it in that envelope, and if I start to panic or, think about, wait a second, can I really do this job? I go back to that envelope. You have to have that anchoring of why was I going to do this in the first place? Because it's fabulous, it's an amazing profession, but it is extremely difficult and
demanding.
Very demanding.
Yes.
But
That's great.
we need passionate people.
So clarity is what you have clarity about what you're going to do. And
Be clear, but have a way of getting back to it too. You don't want to get lost and forget that you had that passion in the beginning of your career.
that's important.
Jay, and I know that you, because I've worked with you, so I know how you interact with students, but tell us what you would do if you were a young teacher, giving that advice to a young teacher.
Be a visionary, be a visionary, and everything is so important, and having that passion. Keep the fire burning, and you'll hear a lot of, you can't do that, it's impossible, we don't have the money. Ignore it. Ignore it. In fact, use that as the fuel to put on your fire. When somebody says you can't do it, it's never been done, or we don't have the funds, make that all the more reason you're going to follow through with your vision and you're going to do it. You can be a leader. We've never been in a better place in the evolution and transformation of education as we are today. It's exciting. You can come into this field and make a difference, and make a huge difference. So have a strong fire, have a vision, and don't waver from it. No matter what the economic times, no matter what the attitudes are, you follow through.
It's incredible how much influence a teacher, an individual, can have on children. And I think that you are all, again, you're just examples of the thousands and thousands of people around the state of Vermont who really make an impact on the lives of our children. And we're in great hands. And I know that we're running a little bit late of time, but I want to just 2 things. Katie or Matt, please just tell us a little about the responsive classroom in 30 seconds or less, or whatever the...
You want to tackle that?
Well, it's really an entire system that is that has its basis in social curriculum. So it's about getting the kids ready for the academic piece. And Matt and I both talked about it. There's a morning meeting.
Yes,
There's a lot of problem solving. There's a lot of support for having the kids to have ways of coping with everything that they encounter. And teachers get trained, and then we continue to work together. And just even what are the things that I'm saying, that how does that impact what a student is hearing? So there's a lot of books, there's a lot of websites. It's a really valuable program for schools. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd just say, it's mostly designed to help manage classrooms. It's a classroom management technique with its core in the idea that kids, in order to be accessible for learning, need to feel like they belong, they're significant, and they have an opportunity to have fun. And I think that with that at its core belief, a lot of things can
And that they're respected and their opinions are respected. And one of my favorite things, even today as a commissioner, I love morning meeting. So someday, invite me.
And it comes
we
in
will.
Spanish.
And when you do it, I'd love to do it in Spanish. I'd love to do it in Spanish. Now, I think Jay, just real quickly, you mentioned before you were talking to us about a teaching style you use called flip teaching. Could you just
Sure, flipped classrooms. And
Flipped
for those
classrooms.
who aren't familiar with the term, a flipped classroom is where learning is taking a shift now, and we say learning is happening 24/7. And so no longer is it just that regular 7 or 8 hour day where the students are in an educational building, but now it's happening around the clock. It's happening because technology is allowing it to. In a traditional classroom, I would stand up front, or a teacher would stand up front, deliver the lesson on the board today, the smart board.
Smart board, yes.
Right? And then the students, and then you would say to them, okay, go to work. And tonight, do some drills and some homework on some examples. But here's what we do today. We say to the kids, here's my YouTube channel, or here's my SchoolTube channel, or here's my Vimeo channel. I want you to go watch this particular segment on Keynote 09 if I'm teaching them a slideshow program. Come to class tomorrow ready to work. And they go home and they watch this tutorial. So now a teacher can actually load their tutorials onto their own YouTube channel and have their own instructional channel that students are learning outside of the classroom. It's the closest I can tell you we've come to copying pasting ourselves, because no longer do I have to repeat myself in front of the classroom. A teacher would say, well, what are you doing? Didn't you hear what I just said up there? Well, of course they didn't. They weren't ready to learn at that particular moment. This affords the opportunity for the student to connect when they are ready to learn. And when they see the tutorial, they're watching it because at that moment they're ready. And they'll absorb it, and they'll come in, and they'll actually perform.
That's great. And I think the last question now, for a foreign language or Chinese, what type of tools are you using? Because it's not like teaching French, where I can turn on the radio station here and pick up, like in my car, all my stations are from Canada. It's a little different teaching Chinese, and particularly in Townsend.
We have a Chinese channel in Townsend.
You do?
We can turn on. No, we don't.
I was throwing a softball.
Someday we will. My teaching is much better now. It's much easier for me compared to 8 years ago, because I'm able to use apps. Students are able to download apps to their iPods, iPhones, or iPads and help them to learn. And I have students with special needs, and apps are the best things ever for my students, because they get to hear the sound and see the actual characters. They also get to use internet a lot, so they can get translation from the websites. They can't translate sentences, but they can do words, and that's huge for our students, and it's extremely helpful for my teaching. So it's a mutual benefit for both my students and myself.
That's great. I wish we had another hour, because there's so many things that I think you are all doing as a matter of your daily teaching that I think is new and different to many people. But I am, as you can probably tell, I loved having you here. I love being with educators, particularly educators who are visionary and are really examples of the thousands and thousands of teachers around the state. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next month on education. Join the conversation. Thank you.